All right, Abhay from Helium Foundation. Welcome. Thanks for coming on, man.
Thanks, Nick. Great to see you.
Yeah, super psyched to have you. What's new in Helium? Everyone knows what it is. Everybody knows who you are. So let's do the updates. What's the latest?
Well, we just executed an enormous migration as a network. Moved over 700,000 wallets and almost a million hotspots over to Solana. That is sort of a massive achievement. I don't know if there has been any other chain that's ever done this before, and certainly nothing at this size. That's for sure. And that is something that we're incredibly proud of, and our community has sort of seen us through this, which is really
And despite all the pundits saying that you might have major mistakes, you actually did really well. And I don't think you can technically call it flawless, but about as close as you can get. So congratulations. That was pretty awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it was a year in the making, right? I think the beginnings of this happened over a year ago. Like first contracts that we sort of iterated on were sort of put together around this time, and that really got us like thinking about how this would work. Also realized that we needed an amazing team to make this happen, and so that's why we find the Strata team and Noah and Brian Thorne were able to sort of actually get us through on the foundation side, and then obviously support from different devs all over the community. Lots of support from the Nova Labs team on the Oracle side. It really was a huge effort.
Yeah, the bench got pretty deep there.
It's necessary. I mean, we have a million hotspots, and we have a massive amount of data that needs to be transitioned. And, we actually also I didn't say this, but the support from the Solana team, the labs team, and the foundation team really also helped us here. Like a lot of the things that they've been building over the last couple of years have really come to pass, and we're able to use some really cool new tech that they have on their chain.
Yeah, I just did a interview with Andrew Fisher at Soul Splits, and the just like the ease of splits and how fast that stuff goes down is it's super cool to see what people are going to be able to build on Solana. So I think of this in terms of it's like a big event, a big race, big competition. At the end of it, there's like a little bit of a letdown because you spent so much time preparing for it, and now the thing is done. And there's always for athletes, for performers, there's always kind of the what's next question, and sometimes that takes a while to figure out. But you guys have also had a lot of runway to figure that out. What's next?
Well, I'm in Florida, so we're going to Disney World, right? Like that's what we have to do, or something. So that's what you have to say. No,
Okay.
we have a lot of work to do. I think this was, I've said this before. This is just a step in the process, right? Us moving all this data over to Solana now enables a lot more things. A lot more devs have been coming actually to us and saying, "Hey, we'd like to support Helium on this chain." So, one part of our role is to help that happen. We're here as a foundation to provide technical support for some of these DeFi teams, some of these NFT projects, and there's some really interesting projects in the regenerative finance space as well. That we'd love to work with them as well. And so one side of the work is that like continuing to support these kinds of teams. For us as the foundation, we are focused on growing usage on the network, right? So the same story that's always been, which is how are we making sure there's a lot of IoT usage on this network? The community has done a phenomenal job creating this coverage, and there really should be usage. It's one interesting thing, unrelated to Solana, but really part of HIP 70 and the architecture change that we've made is we are much better at being able to understand how much data is actually on the network and how much data needs to be paid for on the network. I think Armand recently tweeted a dashboard that we produced that showed that there's over $700 worth of traffic, and on a daily basis. That's a cool number, but maybe the sort of more interesting number there is the number of actual packets being purchased, and that's over 7 million, right? And that is incredible. That is real traffic, real data being paid for on the network, and we should be proud of that work. And the fact that it's $700 is really a feature. Like this is supposed to be really cheap, and that's how
Yeah.
scale will come. Right, the fact that we have this enormous amount of capacity now that's been unlocked with the new packet router infrastructure that's independent from the Solana migration. That is really something I'm excited to talk about with people that actually want to build on this network. And we obviously already have lots of folks that are building, and including yourself, really want to support them.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that the Helium Foundation does is support the community. That's the main kind of thing that you guys do. And I'm seeing some of the grants go out for HNT Denver, for a couple other things. What are some of the either grants or initiatives that you're really excited about seeing, that you're super proud of supporting that or through this Solana migration?
Well, I think one of the, LoRaWAN, one of the things that's still hard is how do you onboard a device, right? And there's some devices that are, just pure LoRaWAN devices, and so they should be fairly straightforward to onboard. But, how do you actually manage, millions, potentially tens of millions of devices someday, if you are a large deployer of sensors? So we're pretty excited about. So we're supporting this side by having a sort of grants, theme or a topic here that's around device onboarding and enabling that as sort of more people get interested in using this network that's been created. So really really excited about that. Excited to talk to founders who want to build more here. We have a couple of sort of really great announcements coming in the pipeline, sort of enabling more users on the network, more sensor deployers on the network, and so stay tuned. Later this month, you'll see some interesting news there.
Pretty exciting. Let's just do it now. Come on.
I've got some other stuff if you want to talk about some other stuff. But yeah, no, like let's save that for the rest of the month. I'll come back on.
Yeah, we'll do that. We'll do it on the next one. Let's see. So one of the things is now we're moving away from Helium Console, which was what you guys provided for free. People could put up to 10 devices on it. They just paid their data credits, and we're now moving on to kind of separate or private LNSs. One of which Disk 91 Paul is running for me, is running for 𝐒𝐮𝐲𝐽. As I've been diving into that, that's a whole new world. Are you guys planning on doing any kind of technical assistance or schooling on that, or are you going to let the market figure that stuff out?
A little bit of both, right? So we want to obviously enable this, right? One of the things that the original Helium console did was almost make it too easy for anyone to use the network. And I know that sounds a little silly, but I think what that does, it also stifles innovation and stifles the market if there is sort of one like official Helium console. I love to see builders like Disk 91 actually building products, and there'll be more LNS providers over time. I think that is a good thing for the market, and each one will have its own feature set, right? Some of them will maybe have embedded features like automatic location tracking or multilateration just sort of built in there, and that's a feature that someone should be able to build on their own, and it doesn't need to depend on the rest of the network. Maybe a very like asset tracking focused LNS, or maybe a temperature sensing focused LNS, or maybe like a very generic LNS. I think one of the things that I was really happy to hear was a company like 𝐒𝐮 is running an LNS, but you have no idea. When you onboard a sensor, you don't really see the back and forth around device management or anything like that. And I think that's pretty cool. And that kind of user experience is something that these developers really, really can build on their own. And we're really just happy to enable that, right? We want to see these LNSs sort of build the appropriate things that are needed for particular verticals, and ship them, and not have this sort of, oh well, I can go to this other Helium console and put in a credit card. The other things that we're also doing, we're working with a team called Sphere to enable like a very simple data credit portal. Like if you just want to use a credit card, you can use it and you can point it at your LNS or your LNS provider, and you can burn data credits directly from the credit card. And that's in addition to what you've been able to do in the past with agent.
Yeah, I just did that the other day. Paul was like, "Hey, you got to load up whatever this thing with $50 worth of credits and go for it." And I was like, "Huh, this is kind of cool," because I use my credit card to buy data credits. It's easy.
And what's cool about that software is that it's a credit card. It uses Stripe. It immediately buys USDC on Solana and swaps it to HNT and burns it to data credits without you even knowing. And that's the kind of user experience we want to have. The crypto part should be almost hidden for 50,000 users.
Yeah. Yeah, there was one thing where I was waiting because I was looking at everything on the screen trying to understand what was going on, and it said like, "Oh, the price changed," and I didn't even see what the price change was. I'm sure the HNT went up or down or whatever it was. Like, so there's still a little bit of the kind of curtain pulled back there, but really cool to see that anyone with a credit card can buy data credits and figure it out.
Yeah.
So that's super cool stuff there. Yeah. Yeah, that's how it's got to be. And that's the interesting part. I know for 𝐒𝐮𝐲𝐽 is we're doing this thing where we're making the reason I'm using Dis91's LNS is to make it so people can come on board through this Medio Scientific, which is basically this kind of demo business that I'm running on Helium, which is kind of a fun thing. What are some of the unlock pieces that you see now that we've got a network that is a lot more stable than it was? You know, we're not relying on consensus groups or validators or any of these things that in the past were like fun, complicated things to do, but weren't really scalable. What are you seeing? Maybe multilateration is one of the first things that comes to mind for me, but what are the big unlocks for you?
I think just improving accessibility to this network is what we should be spending all of our time on. And that is like, if you improve the accessibility, it'll drive usage, and driving usage will, sort of is the reason why this network exists, right? And then there's a reason why, all of us, including myself, like deployed hotspots in the first place. And I think that is, that is what we should be excited about. The fact that anyone can sort of permissionlessly onboard a device as well as onboard a hotspot, like that is why we built this thing. So, anything that, folks are working on, I'm excited to hear about that, just making that process easier, both on the sensor side, but, but also on the hotspot side, in places where there isn't a lot of coverage, right? And that's, light hotspots is another great thing for the network. I think, over the last couple of years, we had these really, really heavy hotspots. It does weigh on me a little bit. Now we have a lot of compute out there, and I'd love to hear about a project somewhere that actually uses some of that compute for, other kinds of workloads. Like I personally tried to run an LLM on my Raspberry Pi 4. It didn't really work out very
Just a
well.
little guy.
But I'm sure as some folks kind of iterate on these kinds of tools, like there's compute available. Certainly, I could imagine a sensor sending up some data and some local computation happening, and sort of pushing right back to the sensor. That could be kind of interesting.
Yeah. And I know BFG Neil over at TrackPack has talked about that. He said, like, hey, we're going to have all this capacity. What's going to happen? It's pretty interesting to kind of speculate a little bit on like, oh, what kind of distributed storage solution is going to come along and use this, because it is just latent capacity. So
That's exactly right.
Maybe that'll be the next DAO, the next sub DAO.
That could be cool. Yeah.
Cool. Now, one of the things with Helium that's pretty cool is it began as a community of strangers on the internet, and we all got on Discord and we all got to know each other by our handles. And then you guys started putting together these events. You had the first Helium House was it Austin? We did one in New York. What are you guys planning as far as next stuff coming up to get people together?
Well, I think we should meet again. I think, during sort of the depth of the pandemic, it was pretty tough to build this community. That's why we all came together online. I think the first Helium House in Austin was, for me, the first actual public event I'd ever done in like 2 years. So I think that was great. I wasn't able to make it to New York, but I'm excited that we're gonna do it again. And I think we've spent a lot of time in the U.S. And I think for good reason. There's a tremendous amount of coverage here, but just across the Atlantic, there's an enormous continent of incredible coverage and incredible employers. And I'm excited to talk about the fact that we're going to do a Helium House in Europe this fall. We're going to do it in Amsterdam. It's going to be at the same time as the Solana Breakpoint conference, and actually right on their campus. We will have our own house on the campus, and anyone who buys a ticket to Helium House will also be able to have access to Breakpoint for those 2 days. So more details about that will be online, helium.com/house, and we're excited to be there. And
ooh, pretty big deal. That's awesome.
Looking forward to mixing some of the Helium and Solana community together. And I have a couple of ideas, a couple of crazy ideas of how we can do that in person.
Yeah, it will be really interesting to see the difference between that and Breakpoint last year, where walking around, there's definitely some people who knew about Helium, and the events that Helium put on, the stages were pretty well attended, but a lot of the folks I talked to had no idea it existed. And now we kind of fast forward a year, it'll be super cool to see like, okay, now it exists, now it actually works. The thing we were talking about that was going to be is here. What are we going to do with this thing? So yeah, I'm super pumped to see what comes out of that.
Yeah, and if any teams out there want
ripping, man,
help participate, or anyone wants to maybe do some kind of activation there, we're open to talk. It's going to be interesting.
Love it, ripping. Well, thanks for coming on, Abhay. It's always good to see you. Always good to catch up and see what's shaking. I'm looking forward to the next time that we connect.
Yeah, we'll talk soon.